Only 0.3% of people on death row get their convictions overturned after 2 decades. Daniel Holden beat those odds, but walking free after 19 years might be harder than surviving prison. Created by Ray McKinnon, Rectify ran from 2013 to 2016 on Sundance TV, and it's criminal how overlooked it remains. Aiden Young delivers a performance as Daniel that's absolutely mesmerizing. He speaks in this measured, almost poetic way that makes you hang on every word. The guy spent 2 decades reading philosophy and religion on death row, so when he talks about existence and time, it hits different. Young captures this otherworldly quality without making Daniel seem fake or pretentious. McKinnon wrote every single episode himself. That's unheard of in television, but it explains why the show feels so cohesive and personal. He grew up in Georgia, and you can feel that. Southern authenticity in every conversation, every family dinner, every uncomfortable silence. The cinematography is stunning. All these long, meditative shots of Daniel walking through forests or sitting on porches. It moves slower than most shows, but that's intentional. Daniel experiences time differently after prison, and the show makes you feel that disorientation. What really gets me is how the show tackles questions about guilt, forgiveness, and whether someone can truly change. Daniel might be innocent, or he might have committed this horrible crime as a teenager. The show never definitively answers that question, which frustrated some viewers, but I think makes it more powerful. The supporting cast is incredible too. Abigail Spencer as his sister, Amantha, carries so much guilt and anger. Luke Kirby as his stepbrother Teddy perfectly embodies small-town resentment. And Clayne Crawford as his other stepbrother John represents this pure, almost naive goodness that contrasts beautifully with everyone else's baggage. This aired on a tiny cable network, so it never got the ratings it deserved. But critics went crazy for it, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for multiple seasons. It won a Peabody Award and got Emmy nominations. Ray McKinnon actually won an Emmy for writing on another show, but this is his masterpiece. The show explores themes of redemption, family dysfunction, and how communities deal with violence and trauma. It's set in this fictional Georgia town where everyone knows everyone, and Daniel's return forces all these buried secrets and resentments to surface. Let me take you through the 4 seasons as Daniel tries to rebuild a life he never really had. Let's be honest, 98% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. Ouch. But hey, we're not mad, just deeply disappointed. I'm just kidding, sort of. Subscribing takes 1 second, costs nothing, and it seriously motivates us to keep making these long, research-heavy videos for you. Our goal? Get that number down to 70% by year's end. So do your part, hit subscribe, and let's jump into Season 1. Season 1. Daniel Holden walks out of death row after 19 years when DNA evidence makes his conviction questionable. He doesn't get exonerated, just released while prosecutors decide whether to retry him. His family picks him up, his mother Janet, stepfather Teddy Sr., sister Amantha, and stepbrother Teddy Jr. The ride home is awkward. Daniel stares out the window, overwhelmed by how much the world has changed. They arrive at the family home where Daniel grew up. His old bedroom is exactly the same. He touches everything like he's in a museum. At dinner, conversation is stilted. Daniel mentions he became a Buddhist in prison and doesn't eat meat anymore. Teddy Jr. makes snide comments about Daniel being a celebrity now. Amantha has been fighting for Daniel's release for years. She's a photographer who never married, dedicating her life to proving his innocence. Daniel's case involves the rape and murder of his teenage girlfriend, Hannah Dean. He was 18 when arrested, tried as an adult, and sentenced to death. The family tire store business suffered when Daniel was convicted. Teddy Sr. married Daniel's mother and tried to hold everything together. Sheriff Carl Daggett handled the original investigation. He's convinced Daniel is guilty and warns the family that people in town won't welcome Daniel back. Some locals still want Daniel dead. Daniel visits his girlfriend Hannah's grave. Her mother, Hannah Dean Sr., catches him there and tells him to stay away. She still believes he killed her daughter. The district attorney, who wasn't involved in the original case, reviews the evidence. DNA on Hannah's body could belong to someone else, but it's not conclusive. They find additional evidence that wasn't tested before. Daniel struggles with basic modern technology. He's never used a cell phone or the internet. Simple things like choosing what to eat or what to wear overwhelm him. He meditates and practices Tai Chi in the backyard. Flashbacks reveal Daniel and Hannah's relationship as teenagers. They were deeply in love, planning to run away together. The night she died, they met at their usual spot by the river. Something happened there, but we don't see everything clearly. Amantha works at an art gallery and has been in therapy dealing with her family's trauma. She meets a married man named Larry and begins an affair. She's angry at the world and uses photography to process her emotions. Teddy Jr. runs the family tire business with his father. He resents Daniel getting attention and believes Daniel's presence hurts their business. His wife Tawny is religious and tries to be kind to Daniel, but even she seems uncomfortable. Janet works as a real estate agent. She's caught between defending her son and keeping peace with her husband and stepson. She loves Daniel, but struggles with guilt about whether she could have prevented his conviction. The season follows Daniel as he slowly adjusts to freedom while the legal system decides his fate. He forms a tentative friendship with Tawny, who seems genuinely interested in his spiritual journey, but their conversations make Teddy Jr. jealous and suspicious. Daniel meets with his new lawyer, John Stern, Teddy Jr.'s brother, who became a successful successful attorney in Atlanta. John is idealistic and wants to help Daniel, even though it creates tension with Teddy Jr. The season ends with Daniel learning the prosecution will retry his case. He might go back to prison or even face execution again. Season 2. Daniel's retrial looms while he continues adjusting to life outside. The prosecution offers a plea deal, plead guilty to manslaughter, and serve a few more years, guaranteeing he won't face the death penalty again. Daniel considers it. John works on Daniel's defense while dealing with his own problems. He's recently divorced and struggling with his law practice. He believes Daniel is innocent and wants to prove it in court. New evidence emerges about George Melton, a man who died years ago but might have been involved in Hannah's murder. Melton was a known sexual predator who lived near where Hannah's body was found. The original investigation barely looked at him. Daniel begins experiencing panic attacks and flashbacks. Prison changed him in ways he's still discovering. He has trouble sleeping and sometimes dissociates during conversations. A therapist tries to help him process his trauma. Tawny becomes more involved in Daniel's life, bringing him books about Buddhism and having long philosophical conversations. Teddy Jr. notices their growing closeness and becomes increasingly paranoid about their relationship. Amantha's affair with Larry intensifies, but she knows it's going nowhere. She channels her frustration into her photography, documenting Daniel's readjustment to freedom. Her pictures capture his isolation and the family's dysfunction. The tire shop faces financial problems, partly due to customers avoiding the business because of Daniel's presence. Teddy Sr. considers selling the property. This creates more tension between him and Daniel. Flashbacks reveal more about the night Hannah died. We see Daniel and Hannah arguing about something, but the details remain unclear. There are hints that someone else was there that night. Sheriff Daggett continues investigating, convinced Daniel is guilty. He interviews old witnesses and looks for new evidence to ensure Daniel gets convicted again. His obsession with the case has consumed years of his life. Daniel starts working at the tire shop, trying to contribute to the family business, yet customers recognize him and some refuse service. One confrontation nearly turns violent when a customer accuses Daniel of being a murderer. Tawny's marriage to Teddy Jr. becomes strained. She finds Daniel's spiritual journey fascinating, while Teddy Jr. only cares about practical concerns like money and reputation. Their religious differences become more apparent. John discovers that the original investigation was sloppy. Evidence was mishandled, witnesses weren't properly interviewed, and Daniel's original lawyer was incompetent. But proving prosecutorial misconduct this many years later is nearly impossible. The season explores how Daniel's presence affects everyone around him. His mother, Janet, tries to act normal, but clearly struggles with having him home. Teddy Sr. wants to support his wife, but worries about the family's future. Daniel begins remembering more about that night with Hannah. The memories come in fragments, some clear, others confusing. He's not sure if what he remembers actually happened or if prison changed his memories. As the retrial approaches, the community becomes divided. Some people believe Daniel deserves a second chance, while others want him back in prison or dead. The family receives threatening phone calls and hate mail. The season ends with Daniel making a decision about the plea deal that will determine his future. Season 3. Daniel rejects the plea deal and prepares for trial. This decision surprises everyone, including John, who worries about Daniel's chances with a jury. The trial begins with jury selection. Finding impartial jurors in a small town where everyone knows the case proves difficult. Prosecution argues Daniel is a manipulative killer who fooled people into believing his innocence. More details emerge about George Melton's possible involvement. John's investigation uncovers that Melton was questioned briefly after Hannah's murder, but released without thorough investigation. Melton had a history of sexual assault. Daniel's relationship with Tawny deepens, though it remains platonic. She visits him regularly, and they discuss philosophy, religion, and life's meaning. Teddy Jr. becomes convinced they're having an affair. Amantha ends her relationship with Larry and focuses on supporting Daniel through the trial. She documents the legal proceedings with her camera, creating a visual record of their family's ordeal. The prosecution presents their case, relying heavily on Daniel's original confession and circumstantial evidence. They argue that new DNA evidence doesn't prove Daniel's innocence, just that someone else might have also assaulted Hannah. John presents the defense, highlighting the original investigation's flaws and introducing evidence about George Melton. He argues that Daniel was a teenager who confessed under pressure after hours of interrogation without proper legal counsel. Witnesses from 20 years ago testify with varying degrees of reliability. Some have changed their stories over time. Others admit they're not sure what they actually saw versus what they heard from others. Daniel testifies in his own defense. He speaks about his time in prison, his spiritual growth, and his relationship with Hannah. When asked directly if he killed her, he gives a complex answer about memory, truth, and uncertainty that confuses the jury. During cross-examination, the prosecutor aggressively questions Daniel about his confession and the physical evidence. Daniel remains calm but acknowledges he can't remember everything clearly from that night. Meanwhile, family tensions reach a breaking point. Teddy Jr. confronts Tawny about her relationship with Daniel. She admits she cares about Daniel but denies any romantic involvement. Their marriage continues deteriorating. John struggles with his own demons while representing Daniel. He drinks too much and makes questionable decisions in his personal life, life. The pressure of the case affects his mental health. Sheriff Daggett takes the stand and defends the original investigation. Under cross-examination, John exposes several procedural errors and instances where evidence wasn't properly preserved or tested. The community remains divided throughout the trial. Protesters gather outside the courthouse, some supporting Daniel, others demanding justice for Hannah. The media attention brings unwanted scrutiny to everyone involved. Janet testifies about Daniel as a teenager, describing him as gentle and incapable of violence. But under cross-examination, she admits she didn't know everything about her son's life or his relationship with Hannah. New evidence emerges suggesting someone else might have been present when Hannah died. A witness comes forward claiming they saw a car they didn't recognize near the scene that night. The trial reveals how much everyone has been affected by this case over 2 decades. Hannah's family still grieves her loss, Daniel's family carries guilt and shame, and the community remains traumatized by the unsolved questions. As closing arguments approach, it becomes clear the jury faces an impossible decision. The evidence is ambiguous, memories are unreliable, and too much time has passed to find definitive answers. The jury deliberates for days before reaching a verdict. They find Daniel not guilty, but the decision splits the community even further. Some celebrate his vindication, while others believe a murderer has escaped justice. In Season 4, Daniel's acquittal brings freedom, but not peace. He struggles with survivor's guilt about the other death row inmates he left behind, particularly his friend Kerwin, who was executed while Daniel was still imprisoned. Daniel now lives at the New Canaan halfway house in Nashville, working a low-paying job while on probation. At the halfway house, Daniel faces new challenges, including a problematic roommate named Manny who masturbates loudly at night, triggering Daniel's prison trauma. During group therapy, Daniel explodes in anger when discussing this situation, but his housemates support him and agree that Manny should show respect. Eventually, Daniel gets a new roommate named Pickle, which delights him. Daniel begins a relationship with Chloe, a woman he meets in Nashville. She becomes pregnant and plans to move to Ohio to raise the child. Their relationship is complicated by Daniel's PTSD and his reluctance to seek targeted therapy. When Chloe encourages him to get professional help, they have a fight. Daniel leaves, asking her to send a postcard from Ohio. Later, when Daniel returns to her apartment, he discovers she's already moved without saying goodbye, leaving behind only a painting and a book. John continues investigating Daniel's case and uncovers crucial new evidence. He learns about Chris Nelms, who gave a sworn deposition stating that he, George Melton, and Trey Willis raped Hannah. John discovers that the original investigation was compromised by political connections. Senator Folks was friends with Chris Nelms' father, Roger, a lawyer, and delayed questioning Chris while hoping Daniel would confess. He decides to quit his job at Justice Row and considers filing an ineffective assistance of counsel claim to dismiss Daniel's guilty plea, partially because he was sleeping with his client's sister, Amantha. He meets with DA Person to share the new evidence about Chris Nelms. Back in Pauley, the family tire shop faces closure. Janet wants to sell to Rite Aid, though Ted remains uncertain initially. They decide to sell, but give Teddy the inventory. The decision strains Ted and Janet's marriage, with Janet accusing Ted of resenting her for years and Ted blaming her for never thanking him for his sacrifices. Tawny's marriage to Teddy Jr. completely deteriorates. At work, she sits by the bedside of Zeke, an elderly patient who eventually dies. The experience affects her deeply. Teddy gently asks Tawny for a divorce, and she agrees. In a moment of instability, Teddy breaks into their former home through a window, setting off the alarm. He gathers fishing rods, guns, and whiskey, then stares at what was once their bedroom. Later, after drinking heavily all day, Teddy shoots at the inflatable tube man outside the tire shop with his rifle. One bullet ricochets and hits his leg, forcing him to call 911 and wait for an ambulance. Janet and Ted drive to Nashville to visit Daniel. During the trip, Janet reveals she might leave Ted, though they later reconcile somewhat when Janet washes Ted's back while he bathes, and they tell each other, "I love you." Daniel takes Janet sightseeing in Nashville, showing her where he works, and introducing her to Chloe before she leaves for Ohio. Amantha reconnects with her old friend Jenny, apologizing for abandoning their friendship during Daniel's ordeal. She has an epiphany about the case, telling John, "Nothing will rectify what's happened. It won't bring back Hannah, or my dad, or my 18-year-old brother." Bobby Dean visits the Talbot home and tells Teddy about his relationship with George Melton after Hannah's death, mentioning that George stopped coming around because Trey went back. Bobby asks Teddy to apologize to Daniel for assaulting him at Hannah's grave, which had sent Daniel to the hospital. Sheriff Daggett, now believing in Daniel's innocence, facilitates John's investigation by leaving Chris Nelms' sworn affidavit where John can find it. The investigation reveals that former Sheriff C.J. Pickens believed Senator Folks was trying to implicate Daniel and that Daniel only confessed after 10 hours of interrogation. Daniel undergoes prolonged exposure therapy for his PTSD, recounting in therapy sessions how he was gang raped multiple times in prison. He listens to recordings of his therapy sessions as part of his treatment, lying in his bed at the New Canaan house. The season culminates with DA Person announcing at a televised press conference reference that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation is opening a new investigation into Hannah's murder. Various Pauley townspeople watch, including Senator Folkes and Chris Nelms. Believing he'll become a suspect in the new investigation, Trey Willis tells Sheriff Daggett crucial information. Hannah fought off Chris Nelm and bit his right hand the night she was murdered, and Chris hid his injuries at the police station the following day. Trey also reveals that Chris told him the next morning, "Bitch should have kept her mouth shut and none of this would have happened." Daggett visits Trey to tell him they're dropping the murder charges against him over George Melton's death, which prompts Trey to finally reveal the truth about Chris Nelms' involvement. The entire Talbot Holden family enjoys a final meal together at home, during which Janet receives a call from Daniel. Teddy reconciles with Daniel over the phone, and Tawny says goodbye to Daniel. The family finds closure in these final moments together. Janet and Jared visit the Dean family, where Janet speaks with Judy in Hannah's room. Judy tells Janet she now believes Daniel is innocent, providing some measure of peace to Daniel's mother after years of uncertainty. The season ends with Daniel lying awake in his bed at the New Canaan house, fantasizing about reuniting with Chloe and holding her baby. The show leaves us with profound questions about justice, memory, and whether redemption is possible even when truth remains elusive. Each character finds their own way forward, but Daniel's journey from death row to freedom to self-discovery remains one of television's most powerful character studies. What did you think about Daniel's decision to leave everything behind and start fresh in Nashville? And after seeing those final flashbacks, do you believe he was truly innocent of Hannah's murder? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit that subscribe button for more similar content.